All right, everybody, we'll get to this today. I've been having a tough time with this. The course is jinxing me for some reason. Anyway, today we're gonna if you go to web 422.ca, scroll down to the authentication in Next.js. That's what we're looking at today, and it's basically so far. If you look at the lecture from last week, we've created an API that will authenticate our users. And when we talk about authentication, ew, look at this ads. When we talk about authentication, remember, oh, get out of here. Oh my goodness. There we go. Remember that we have our React site over here, and then we have our API, which lives over here. And we've been doing this so far, all on our own systems. But in real life, we probably host the React site or your website, your front-facing website, at some other location than your API. And we want to make sure that users who are accessing our API are actually the users we want to be able to access it. So we're going to create this access token that we send back to React. React's going to then, or we're going to program it so that we're authenticated to use the API, and then we're going to, you know, interact with it. Now, if you don't have this from last time, just go to the introduction to JWT, go to example code, and download the simple-API complete. When you have this simple API complete, and you can download the whole thing, but since we did it, just make sure you get it running. So the way you get it running, um, make sure I made this mistake. Make sure you're in the simple API folder, and you don't need to touch anything except for in MongoDB connection string. Now, remember, we will be using MongoDB. If you didn't set this up last time or even last semester, let's just see. Make sure you go to Mongo Atlas, sign up for an account, and then you can get your connection string. Once you have that working, do your npm install and then node server.js. This should run our API, which will be, just running in the background, and that's what we'll be connecting to. You can test if you got it running. I use something called Bruno, or you can use Postman, and I'm going to test it with the vehicles API, so localhost 8080 API vehicles. And if your whole thing works, you should get unauthorized as your response from the server, because our API vehicles is looking for authorization before it gets connected to. Now, technically, if you really, really want to try it, we could get rid of the authentication out of the API. I would just take this out right in the vehicles. That's the middleware right here, and then restart the server. And if I click vehicles, I should get some vehicles back, which I do. Right, so that's taking out the authentication, but we're gonna leave it in, and we can let this run in the background. I'll leave it over here somewhere. But today, again, we're going to make it so that we can connect, or we can add authentication to our Next.js project. And to get us started, just to save a little bit of time, there's example code for this too. So if you go to this authentication in Next.js and grab not the complete one, I mean, you can, but it's cheating. Not cheating, you're not going to learn. Grab the vehicles UI one, and we'll do some code in there. And that's where we're going to start off. So once you have it open, right, your vehicle's UI, do your npm install. Oh crap, in the wrong folder. Make sure you go to my app, then your npm install, and then just run the program. After it installs, just go ahead, do npm run dev, and just make sure this works so far. And npm run dev. And notice we have two servers running, right? We have our API server on 8080, and then we have our actual website on localhost. And here it is right here. Pretty simple. It's kind of, why is it? Oh, that's why. There we go. Pretty easy. So once you have this running, now what we want to do is we have to set up our React app to have basically an authentication library, which will handle all of our, JWT tokens. It'll tell us if we need to log in to get to a certain page, and so on and so forth. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a lib folder And inside of here, I'm going to create something called authenticate.js. And then really we just have to process our authentication. And the first one that we want to do is our user authentication. So we'll do something like export authenticate user. And we're going to pass in from our website over here, we're going to pass in, username and password. And we're going to do that with a form, just like if you were to log into Facebook, right? There'd be a form. We're going to, mimic this kind of thing. And we're going to pass our username and password. Typically when you're doing this, and I'm going to copy and paste some of this code in here just for time's sakes. Typically, this is the username and password is passed across HTTPS, which is encrypted, but it is still passed as plain text. But you only really want to do that once, and then you want to pass these tokens over, because then you're not passing the username and password all the time. You're just checking if tokens are correct. It means so if something gets hacked or someone intercepts the packets, then we don't have to deal with changing users' passwords, or their password won't be compromised. Their token will be compromised, but we can issue new tokens. So I just made this a little bit bigger so you can see it. So all this is saying is, um, I'm gonna send in the username and password to our API, which is located at this URL, right? If we go to the .env, which is our localhost 8080 API, which is our site that's running right here, right? And we're gonna wait for the data to come back, which is right here. And if our status code is 200, meaning everything's okay, then we're going to set a token using a set token function that I haven't created yet. But I'm going to set this access token, and that's it. Hopefully we're authorized. So we have to make these other functions. So I'm going to again copy and kind of paste these in just to show you. So this one will obviously set the access token. And you're probably wondering, oh, what's local storage? So local storage, if you right click in your browser and go inspect, and then go to memory, no, it's not application. And application, if you recall from last semester, you can see everything in here that we can do on the browser. So like cookies, um, and we have this thing called local storage. So local storage can actually hold values, information that the server wants us to hold. And in here, we're going to actually hold the token. So this is where I'm saying, hey, on the client side of our browser, save the access token so that I can use it later to authenticate with the API. If we go back to that drawing, where did it go? Go back here. So we're going to authenticate, or we're going to say, hey, I'd like to get an access token. API sends it back to the front end, and then the front end saves it in our browser. And that's what this is doing. We also have to make the accessors, right? So we're going to have to at some point, we're going to want to get the token from the browser. If we come back to the site later, we'll also want to remove it, right? In case we want to log out. And then there's one, it's called read token. And because we have to, decrypt the token to make sure that it's, correct, we're going to use a built-in thing called JWT decode. And we'll just import that at the top up here. All this code is on Web422, so you can see this if you want to take a look at it. And then the last one is we just need to know if the user is authenticated. And we use the read token to do that. And if the user is authenticated, then we let them through the rest of the site. Pretty easy. This is pretty much typical for any programming language that we're doing in on front end development for logins. This is why those other OAuth sites and stuff like this they exist, because this is a lot of work and you pretty much have to implement it every time you make a website with a login. Okay, next step. Right now we don't have a page that allows us to log in, right? We only have home, vehicles. So let's make a login page. So I'm going to go to pages and just make a new file called login. And again, I'm going to copy and paste this. It's easier. But basically, we're going to say create a form that sends your login information, right? It looks like this. And in fact, let's add it to the nav bar too, right? Let's do that. Actually, this class is starting soon, and I want to get this done. Okay, well, we'll just type it in. So we want to go to uh, the login page, right? But there is none, obviously. So we'll create this one, and what now we do, and just note that typical login page, typical form, but I coded this to say come back and do this later. But this is really just to show what's happening. So check this out. If I'm on this page and I right click, go inspect, go to console, and I type in, we'll just type in my username and then password, whatever. You can notice, hey, we still have to do the connection, but it does work, which makes sense. So we're going to add in the authentication. Again, not too difficult, and I'll explain it as we go. Let's just, we'll pop it in here like this. So that to do is basically saying, hey, run the authenticate user, right? It's by sending in the username and the password. Go to, use the vehicles API and go over here. And if we check out authenticate user, it'll go to login. Or sorry, this is saying after we've been authenticated, go to the vehicles page. And then, right. So if you go to authenticate user, it'll do all the things that we said about if it's active or if the token works, it'll come back. So let's give it a shot. Now, what did I did something wrong? It says failed to compile module not. Oh, I didn't npm install JWT decode and then start your server again. Should give us our login page, which it does. And then we can test this out. Now, before you do, don't forget if you didn't set up your JWT from last time, we're gonna have to register a user. So you go register, and again, you can grab this from Seneca site. But if you go back to the introduction, oops, not that one. Right here, and then look for, I think it was Bob, something like this. Where did it go? Right here. Oh, I swear it was in here somewhere. Where's Bob? Hold on. Oh, right here on the first page. So if you grab this, right, and we know that our API works, change this to a post, change this to register, and then in our post body, change it to JSON, pass in a registration, right? So if we were doing this in real life, or if we're making a page register page, you would do the same thing as our login, but make it register. But we'll manually do it and then run this. And oh, I've already done this once, but this would add Bob to our cloud, our MongoDB. And so I can log in with Bob and then my password. Oops, my password. And if this works, hopefully it does, it should take us to the vehicles page, which it does. Super easy. Next.js and Node makes this quote unquote super easy. But why do we go through this trouble, especially when we have an API we can have one built into React. Why have these separate ones? Well, think about what we do as programmers. We're not only making a website, maybe we'll make, a phone app, right? Maybe there's some phone app that we need. Maybe we'll make it on our fridge, right? So this API can be reused and we don't have to keep creating connections to the database. All we have to do is create, an authentication and then something to able to use the API calls. Real easy. That's it. I've done this stream 3 times. Hopefully this video works. You guys have a great day.